Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to part 3 of this 3-part series on how to play better fingerstyle blues. If you play fingerstyle blues and you're trying to build your repertoire and have more things to play and have a collection of fingerstyle blues instrumentals that you can pull out and play when you want to do something interesting on your own. I hope that today's lesson will really help you move in that direction with a really sort of clear, hands-on way to take a short idea, like one chorus of the blues, and build it out into a complete 2 to 3 minute song. As I've mentioned in previous lessons in this installment, one of the biggest challenges to something like fingerstyle blues is knowing what to work on and how to work on it. And if you don't have that, then you can take your practice time can end up getting wasted, looking for the right lessons or learning stuff that isn't really going to help you, or just playing the things that you already know, and nobody wants that, right? So the idea is to put some specific tools in your hand so you can know what you're doing when you sit down to work, to get you towards the point where you can play the way that you want to play. Solo instrumental fingerstyle repertoire is something that I've always wanted to have. And when I started playing, I didn't really know that that's what I was looking for, but I was lucky. I had a teacher who taught me to fingerpick fairly early on, but I wasn't going to sing. I was like 12 or 13, and I was like, there's no way anybody's getting me to open my mouth in public. So I would take these picking patterns that she had showed me, and I wasn't even really like thinking that hard about this, but I was like, well, can I put the melody on top on the guitar? Like, I'm already doing something with my fingers. And I'd heard of Merle Travis and heard of Chet Atkins and people like that, but I couldn't find their records. So I just tried to figure out a way to put the melody on top of the thumb. And that worked okay. But, with a song, you have words. And so the thing that makes each next verse sound different is that the words change. And so if I was doing this with a folk song, then after one time through, it was kind of like, well, that was fun. Now what happens? And so I was kind of stuck there for a while, until I started listening more to blues and jazz and noticing that, there's improvising going on. And so, especially with jazz, it was like, oh, okay, so you can play the melody at the beginning and then you can have a bunch of improvising and then you can have the melody at the end. That'll solve the problem, which of course creates a whole new problem, which we talked about last time, which is how do you improvise while you're the accompaniment as well as the soloist? But that was, sort of another step along the way towards trying to figure out how to play solo instrumental blues. And then the third real light bulb came much later when I was writing music, and I got a job writing what's called library music for a television show. So when they don't know, when they're not going to actually score the music to the show, they'll just collect a bunch of music and put it in a library, and then as they're editing the show, they'll drop in tracks here and there. So this one show, they wanted blues instrumentals. They wanted, and it was like, here are the rules. Like, we need 12 of these. We need them by this deadline. And, they need to be at least 2 minutes long, preferably 3. And I was like, that doesn't sound too bad. And they're like, oh, yeah, and we're not paying for copywritten material. So no Muddy Waters songs, no B.B. King songs, no Robert Johnson songs. You've got to be like original blues, right? So I started working on these. And there's nothing better than having to do a lot of something, because you get a lot of tries, right? You get to do a bunch of different iterations of it. So as I went through making these tunes, these instrumentals, I suddenly realized, it's a song, right? So it's got to have sections. So I'm like, well, I would get the initial idea of I'm going to do a 12-bar blues like this or an 8-bar blues like that. I'll be in this key. It'll have this kind of melody. But then I was like, okay, well, before that, I'll do an intro. And then maybe after I play the melody, I'll play the melody again, but I'll play it up an octave, or I'll play it, with double stops. And then I'll come back and play that intro again, like a little vamp, to set up the solo. Then I'll take the solo. Then I could do the vamp again, or maybe I'll do kind of like an ensemble. I'll pretend I'm an ensemble. I'll play like a bunch of chord things over the bass, and then I'll, you know, come back to that vamp, and then I'll play the melody out, and then by then hopefully we'll be near 2 minutes. And so I did this over and over, and so I kind of came up with this little scheme for like how to, not just only how to have different sections, but also like how to frame the solo part in something bigger that I could count on, that wasn't just improvising, and also that had kind of an arc to it, had a kind of a narrative. It kind of grew and built and, you know, reached a certain point and then wound down afterwards. So the whole thing about this was like, I wanted, you know, I needed to come up with more and more tunes. And so I needed to take the guesswork out of how I was going to do that. So that once I had the original idea, I had this little assembly line I could put it on and go, okay, well, now we need an intro. Now we need, you know, a solo. Now we need this. Now we need that. So my goal with this lesson is to take the guesswork out of your process by giving you this seven-step scheme that I use to create arrangements, and you can use it too. It's really intuitive and pretty simple once you work on it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use these little building blocks, like, you know, vamps and solos and the melody and something called the shout chorus, which I'll explain in just a moment, to have this 7-step process. So this is the sort of the last piece of the puzzle. If you know how to play the tune, and you know how to, you know, make sure the groove is solid, and you know how to improvise on that tune, now we're going to wrap all that in this structure so that it sounds like a complete song. So if you haven't downloaded the tab yet, there's a tab booklet that you can get at the link below. Just go grab that. I'll also put the notation and all this stuff on the screen while we do this lesson this morning. And if you haven't watched those first 2 lessons on groove and improvisation, you can go check those out as well, either now or when you're done with this or later. They'll be up for a few more days. And that's the idea. So nice to see all of you here. And with that, let us get rolling. Okay, so looks like everything is still working. You can still hear things and see things. So let's get rolling. Shazam. Here it is. Okay, so this is what I call the 7-step arc. There's 7 steps, and it helps to create that sense of rise and fall that makes an arrangement feel like it's, you know, telling a story, kind of going somewhere, taking you someplace. So the idea is, and I've been using this for every intro and outro that I've played in this lesson series. So you open with an intro or a vamp, and if the term vamp is not familiar to you, I'll explain that in just a moment. Then, you know, using what we learned in the groove lesson, you can play the fundamental version of the melody, which is a more basic version of the melody, and then you could, the second time around, kind of up the ante with the embellished version, bring in those double stops and that descending bass line. That kind of takes the energy level up a little bit. Then you could go into a solo. So notice here that improvising is only a very small part of the whole picture, right? You don't have to be able to take like an epic 20 chorus solo to be an improviser and to play solos on blues. You can just fold it in as part of the whole experience. The great fingerstyle jazz guitar player Gene Bertoncini said one time that the arrangement is a safety net. And he played in a duo with the bass player Michael Moore. He may still do so. And so they played jazz, they played standards and, you know, their own arrangements of tunes. And, you know, Gene's thing was, you know, if you have a good arrangement, some nights you're hot, you sound great, you're inspired, you're improvising, and you feel good about it. Some nights, you know, the vibe isn't there and you're not playing that great. But if you have a good arrangement, you know, 60%, 70% of the music is still going to sound good. It's like a guarantee that, you know, there's going to be some good stuff there. You've put this thought in ahead of time to create something sturdy. So if the improvisation is great, everything rises to an even better level. If the improvisation is just workmanship, you know, a workmanlike, just craftsmanship, it's okay. It's a solo. It'll sound good. It just might not be the most inspired thing, but the rest of the tune will still sound every bit as good. So I love that idea. So here's the solo. After the solo, the solo is sort of considered like the most exciting part of the song, right? But there's this idea of this thing called the shout chorus, which, like the vamp, I'm going to explain in a moment. After the shout chorus, which is like usually a chordal, riff-based kind of idea that brings everything to a climax, go back out to a vamp to kind of cool things down, and then go out with maybe the embellished version of the melody. Or from the shout chorus, you keep sort of riding that energy and go into the melody, and then you could bring it down with a vamp towards the end. But it's just these 7 parts, and these 7 pieces are enough to create the feeling of a finished and complete song. And the good thing is we've already gone over the fundamental, the embellished, the soloing, and the embellished. So really, if we just can work on a vamp and some vamp ideas and some shout chorus ideas and this bigger picture, we'll be good to go. Hey, come on, you. I said, come on, you. Where's my next page? All right, hang on a second. I knew things were too good to be true. Everything was going so smoothly. Rats. Okay. Let's try this again. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. This sucks. I don't know why I won't do it today. Usually this works great. Is this the... Oh, this is the wrong version. It only goes to this page. That's why. Okay, stand by. Hang on, let me fix this. There's no reason for y'all to have to look at that while I fix it. So give me 1 second. I'll get the right document up. Try to put on a professional show. And this is what happens. Maybe this is the right one. Stand by. Nope. Yep. Nope. Yep. Nope. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Yes. All right. Your patience greatly appreciated. Here we go. Okay, we're back. So now let's move. There we go. Okay. All right. So let's talk about vamps and intros. So a vamp is, we can define it this way. It's a chord progression that either rocks between 2 chords or forms a kind of short cyclical progression with maybe 4 chords total, right? I mean, you've heard vamps your whole life. But the idea is, so like, right, this is just going between basically E minor, G, and A. And it's just going around in a circle. Right? Or you could have, to go sort of outside of the tonality of this particular tune, right? But you could have, I guess that's still inside E minor. Right? So like when you hear a band and like they're starting off, it's like a cliche. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, tonight in the studio, we're proud to feature, right? And so like the vamp, it's like the expression in the Count Basie band was vamp till ready. Like, you come in and the rhythm section just does this thing. They're killing time. They're setting up the feel and the mood, and then when they get to the right point, then you're into the song, right? So it's a way of just, treading water, basically, musically. So the bass could either be a pedal point or it could move with the chord progression. Now, a pedal point means staying on one note in the bass while other things happen on top. And it comes from classical music where the organist in the church, would have these pedals like a modern B3 player would have. And so if you're holding down a bass note with your foot and then doing all this other stuff on top, then it's called a pedal point. That's where it comes from. But it just means like, in the same example, if I had all these different voicings, I'm just keeping that bass on the bottom. Or, the bass could move. Right, so those are the two options here. Staying on the root with a pedal point or moving. Now the voicings, meaning what the chords that you play. A voicing is just a fancy word that means the order in which the notes come. So this is E minor, and this is E minor, and this is E minor. But those are three different voicings of E minor, because in one case the root's on top, the next case the third's on top, then we got the fifth on top. So it's just different ways of laying out the voices in the chord. Each individual note is considered a voice, because it comes from, again, from classical music, from chorale, chorus writing, where like each part of the chord is literally someone's voice, right? So we still have that word. So you could have, with the voicings, you could have a common tone on top. Like if you're going between E minor and A7, you could keep one note going on top. Like let's say you have this E minor chord, and then when you go to the A, you decide you're going to keep this B on top. Now that B is a common tone. It's a tone that's in common between the two chords. So you could have your vamp going. If you could play the guitar, it would sound like this. Or in that example of the cycle, you could have. Right, just keeping one note on top all the time. By contrast, the guide tone line is the idea that you have a slowly climbing or descending melody, often chromatic, right? It's kind of a thread through the chord. So you might decide that you're going to have you want to hear that on top. So right, so you'd have that sound of. Right, so you get this sense of motion, and you could have it coming down too. And it could also be, tighter intervals than that, but that's a good example for this particular situation. So you could have guide tone on top or a common tone on top, and then the groove, meaning what the thumb is doing, could either just be that quarter note bass like I've been doing, or it could be what's called an ostinato. And again, one more classical music term, ostinato means a repeating rhythmic figure. If you've seen any movie scored by Hans Zimmer, you've heard an ostinato, right? Because it's something like. Right, it's syncopated, it's repetitive, but you could have, so in the case of our tune, if you had these chords, you don't have to be playing quarter note in the bass. You could have. So now you've got this ostinato, this repeated figure in the bass, right? So the idea is, the vamp starts with the idea of it's just a way to kill time over a few chords, but you have all these different choices that you can make inside of that idea. So let's look at some specific ones for this tune. And we'll start with the one that I have been playing, and which you got if you watched the groove lesson last Thursday. I included this one, but I'm just going to include it in the tab again here, just so we've got it. So, and it's this one. Right? So this has a short chord cycle, right? Just going from E minor to G to A. And the bass is going in quarter notes. Now this one actually has a little blues riff on top. But so it doesn't really have chords on top, so it's not really a question of like, are they common tone or guide tone line voicings. But we've got this bass that's moving. It's a quarter note pulse, but the bass is climbing up. So just to play that in slow motion. And so you could do the horizontal 3-step with this and just go, okay, here's the bass. And then here's what's going on top. And then put them together, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, right? And there's a pinch, so that's just G, thumb, middle and ring, thumb, middle and ring on the A chord. Right, so you need to work through it, but that's the idea. So that's one kind of vamp, and you could start out the tune that way. And notice you could do it for as long or as short as you like, which is the beautiful thing about a vamp. So here's another one, vamp number 2. And in this case, we are rocking back and forth between 1 and 4. Sorry, 1 and 5. But we're using blues licks again, and a slightly different voicing of E minor and B. And I've been using this one over the last couple of lessons as well. So here we've got an E minor 7 actually. Here's the flat 3rd, here's the 5th, here's the flat 7. It looks kind of like a G chord, but it lets you play this. And then come up to So I like including this one because it's just a way of opening it up and making it sound a little more contemporary and a little less obviously like blues. The B sounds almost like a B minor. You could think of it as a B7 sharp 9. But here, it's basically keeping a steady bass going on E, and then a steady bass going on B. And then on top, we've got this sort of rolling arpeggiated kind of melody. And then this technique where you're crossing and playing higher pitched notes on lower strings. So you've got, instead of playing like that for flat 7, 5th, flat 7, and root, you're playing it like this, while keeping the bass going. So pull off from the pinky. And more of that kind of technique there. So that is a completely different animal. It's just going between 2 chords, and it's got this kind of cascading, gentler kind of melody on top instead of like a real blues licks. I mean, it's blues licks, but played in a way that's not articulated like blues licks. So we can also, here's a 4-chord cycle, and it's like the bass line when I was talking about doing this. The idea of playing the root, the 6th, the 2nd, and the 5th. This is kind of a variation on that. Sorry. So we're going from E minor to A over C sharp. So going basically from 1 to 4, and then F sharp to B7. And one thing about the vamp is that it exists outside of the chord progression itself. So you have a certain amount of latitude to make stuff up. This exact sequence of chords doesn't exist in the melody. It doesn't exist in the original, the original version of the melody that I gave you. But because we're operating kind of outside of the actual tune, you're freer to try different things. And so in this case, we've got 1 to 4, which we do have in the tune, 5 and 6, but here we're tightening it up and fitting that into one bar. And then we do have F sharp and B in measures 6, I guess. So we're just sort of putting that together. I'm looking at the bass motion, 1, 6, 2, 5, and going from E minor to A over C sharp to F sharp to B7. So it's getting this lick on top. Your index finger, actually, I broke my own rule. Use your index finger on the D string and your middle finger on the G string. And then put those things together. And then your thumb comes in to play that last bass note on beat 4 and pull off to the open D. Second time, measure 4 is a little different from measure 2. But so that's a different kind of vamp with a 4-chord cycle. And then you're into or the solo or wherever you're going. So this is just an alternate with a different kind of syncopation where you're going to hit, you're going to move this note here up half a beat and come in right on the downbeat. So you'd have, and this would start later, right? So instead of starting on the downbeat, instead of having, now we're going to have, which is just a, pretty subtle variation. Oh, sorry. So just a subtlety. You can mix things up like that. 2 more. Here's one with pedal point, common tone on top, and an internal guide tone line. So all these different elements, right? So we've got pedal point again, but we're putting different chords over it. This is F sharp 7 with a flat 5, but we're keeping E in the bass and we're keeping E on top. And then going down to A with E in the bass, and then going down to E minor. And so you've also got this guide tone line in the middle going. And on some level, your ear will lock into that. And that contrast between the common tone on top and the descending guide tone line in the middle is really effective. So if you were coming out of the solo or out of the melody, a lot of times you might, in this particular tune's case, clip the ending so that instead of you go from the turnaround right into the vamp and take out the last bar. So like that. And finally, let's do an ostinato. So here we have what I'm calling an ensemble ostinato. So the ensemble being like your whole hand, right? Like all we have is bass and the upper strings. So everybody, the thumb and the fingers are all going to play the same syncopated rhythm. And then we're going to have a guide tone line in the bass and a common tone on top. And it sounds like this. I played this during the opening, but... So here's our descending bass line. That's our guide tone line, basically. A common tone on top until we get to here. And then the rhythm of it, the fact that everybody's playing, sorry. There's no steady bass, like the thumb is grabbing chords along with the fingers. So that's a different kind of sound. So those are some vamps. And now let's talk a little bit about what the shout chorus is. So the shout chorus, this is an idea that I learned about from listening to the Benny Goodman Sextet with Charlie Christian, which is some of the first jazz that I really liked, and Duke Ellington and early Count Basie. And it's the idea that, especially like in the early Count Basie stuff, there'll be this moment where, you know, someone's soloed and, you know, there's been the melody and the solo and this and that, and then suddenly there's this moment where everybody's playing together. And I can only assume that the shout chorus gets this idea because it sounds like everybody's shouting at once, right? There's three sections in the big band plus the rhythm section. You know, there's the trumpets, the trombones, and the saxophones. And if they all kind of line up and do everything together, it sounds gigantic. And in a electronic era, right, in the 1930s, the best way to get a big sound in a space is to have a bunch of musicians, right? So if you have 18 musicians on stage, 16, 17, 18 musicians in a big band, and they all start playing at the top of their register at once, it's going to sound enormous to somebody who has never heard a guitar through an amplifier or, you know, been in a IMAX theater, right? Those horns are going to sound just tremendous. So they would do this as a kind of climactic moment in the arrangement. And so we can do something, you know, a miniature version of that by working with chords and rhythms and riffs on the guitar. So some basic distinctions between the shout chorus and the vamp. The most important one is that it follows the form, right? So unlike the vamp, which can kind of be anything cyclical, the chord progression for the shout chorus sticks to what the tune already has. And the bass, similarly, is going to move with the chord progression. And the groove, for the most part, is going to continue to be a quarter note if we're playing steady bass. But the voicings are a bit of a different story. You can have common tone voicings. You can have guide tone voicings. You can have passing chords, where you move through different chords to get where you're going. And you can have chord substitutions. Now, in this particular arrangement, we're not going to get too much into passing chords and chord substitutions, but on a more standard 12-bar blues, that would be a pretty big part of what you're doing. So let's look at a few of them, and then I'll get into a few questions that are coming up, and then I want to show you how to put all this together to end up with the complete arrangement. So in this case, for this shout chorus, we're going to actually use a wee spot of music theory. And we're going to talk about the Dorian scale for just a minute. Now, I don't want to get into all the details of what mode is what and how they're derived. For now, we're just going to look at the Dorian mode as its own thing. And the simplest way to think of a Dorian scale is that it is like a major scale, only it's got a flat third. That's what makes it sound minor. And a flat seventh, but not a flatted sixth. So if you're in E and you're going up the scale, and this is your E scale, here's the third note. We're going to bring that back a half step or flat it. Still play the sixth, and then here's the major seven. We're going to bring it back a half step and make it a flat seven. So we've got root, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, root. And so that's what I've tabbed out in this first example here, just putting it over the bass. And I'm doing that because Dorian happens to go with the sound of 1 minor but 4 major or dominant. It has the notes that help you spell out an E chord, and it has the notes that help you spell out an A chord, which other minor scales don't, because other minor scales often have a flat 6. So you can only get 1 minor and 4 also minor, but Dorian has this major 6th, which lets you make a 4 chord that's major. So I know if I've got E minor and A7 that E Dorian is going to fit over both those chords. So now I want to figure out a way to do some double stops and different things with this scale. So I'm going to look at how to play Dorian on the 3rd string. And so on the 3rd string, I'll be starting with the flat 3rd of the scale. And I'll have the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and the flat 7. And you can see there it is. There's the 6th. That looks just like, you know, the 3rd of an A chord. But so I've got notes of Dorian on the 3rd string. Let me see if I can put some notes of Dorian on the 2nd string, starting with the 5th. There's the 6th, there's the flat 7, there's the root, and there's the 2nd. So now I could play a harmonized Dorian scale. So I've already got some double stops, which is on my way to playing some chords, which is going to help me to play some shout chorus stuff. And what we're going to do is, one of the ways that you hear the shout chorus used in early big band music is as a way to set off the soloist. So someone will solo, and then the shout chorus will happen over, like, say, the first 4 bars of an 8-bar phrase. And then the soloist will pick up and continue. It'll kind of give them a push. You have this 4 bars of riffing, and then the soloist will, you know, have to sort of keep going. Then 4 more bars of punctuation. It's kind of the opposite of call and response, right? Instead of having the melody and then answered by the chords, you have the shout chorus, and then the soloist has to kind of keep the excitement going. So we're going to be the band and the soloist. We're going to play a shout chorus for the first 4 bars of the form, and then we'll solo for the second 4 bars of the form. So here are 3 shout chorus ideas we can build using this Dorian idea. And here's the first one. So I'm playing 3 bars of E minor, 1 bar of B7, and I'm keeping the root on top. And so I could play that for 4 bars. And then solo. And then repeat. Right? And so it gives me a way to solo for 2 choruses, but I'm only improvising for half of each chorus, and I've got this structural thing that sounds cool and always gives me something to kick off of and catch my breath and go on to the next thing. Here's another version of that idea. We can make more of a riff out of it. Right? And keeping that, and then punctuating with those, the root and the 5th on top. So. Again, just playing over the first 4 bars. So. And dynamics play some part of it too. You know, you can always pull it back for the solo, make it really loud for the shout chorus, vice versa. Finally, here's one more. And this is more of like sort of taking the shout chorus idea and merging it with like almost like a real traditional like Delta blues kind of feel. So those kind of chords with like an upward brush with your index finger. So it's the 5th, 7th, and root of E. And then going to B minor 11, which is definitely not a Delta blues sound, right? So it's kind of a way to collide these different ideas. So 1, 2, 3, and... So when you play a particular shout chorus more than once, it starts to take on a kind of momentum. So once you have all of those things, now you can see how to slot them into this 7-step arc, right? So I could take a particular intro, like this one, right? And then I could go into the fundamental, then I could do the embellished, take my solo, then I can go into my shout chorus. And solo on the way out of that. And then go into a vamp. Set up my last pass through the melody. So let me play through a whole version of that, and then let's get into some questions if you've got them. So post your questions while I'm going through this, just sort of putting the whole thing together, and then I'm happy to just talk about anything that went by too quickly or further questions. Like I see a couple here already, so we'll get into those. Okay, here we go. So. Fundamental. And here comes the embellished. And now I'm going to actually stick a vamp in here. Solo. Another chorus of solo. so it gives you this whole thing. And again, it's modular. You can change it up. One of my favorite things to do is actually to go out on a vamp and then find a way to do a little improvising at the end on the vamp. Different ways you can do it. That's a kind of tricky vamp to solo over, but there's other ones that are not so hard. So that's the idea. Let me take a couple of these questions and just see if there's anything else I can clarify before we get out of here. Let's see. Oh, would I use the same type of vamps for a 12-bar blues? Probably, a 12-bar blues in E that was not in E minor, would address it a little differently, maybe. Certainly like something like this is based on more of a minor sound, right? But the same idea would certainly work. The idea of you could vamp between 1 and 5. Let's see. Or 1 and 4 might be nice. Right, that's sort of the same mix of double stops. Chords, and then a little bit of a blues lick to punctuate. Maybe a little bit of a bass line up to the 5. Or maybe, do the chords up here. So this E7 and this A7, so which could then become common tone on top, right? Or 1, 6, 2, 5. Allergic to things that sound that jazzy. Just doing the 1, 6, 2, 5 as a bass line, half step above every chord that you're going to, and then turning it into a dominant chord. Or one of my favorite things is to take blues licks and then put them over the 1, 6, and 2, 5 dominant, and they start to sound really kind of exotic and weird and nice. So so I'm just taking a little blues lick. And then like that. So there's the vamp is really flexible, right? And it can be really simple too. Like if you're about to play a 12-bar blues, you could sit and vamp on the 5. Tune, right? Or you could vamp on 1. The vamp is a very flexible thing by design. So So let's see. I hope that answers that question. What strings and gauge am I using? I am using John Pierce phosphor bronze strings, light gauge, so with a 12 on top, a 56 or a 59 on the bottom. Whatever they are, they're old as dirt. I change them when they break. So if that means anything, yeah, that's what, you know, I love the sound of steel strings, love the phosphor bronze sound, I love the sound of new strings, but they die, they lose that new string. You know, strings are like bubblegum, right? They're like the first 5 minutes, it's amazing. And then like, well, it's just what it is. You know, the strings sound like they sound. I do love the John Pierce strings. I've been playing them forever. But I don't change them very often. So you get what you get. Let's see. Here's a comment from Todd. Hello, Todd. You don't have to be able to play like David to make these arranging ideas work for you. As an intermediate player and a Fingerstyle 5 member, I've gained a huge amount from oh, thank you, Todd. That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, you can do these things on a very, you can adjust them to whatever level is going to work for you. The main idea here is just to be able to take, again, like if you've learned a blues, like you've learned the melody to a tune, like, you know, like this one, or, you know, there's a lot of great 8-bar blues tunes, you know, Trouble in Mind and St. James Infirmary, House of the Rising Sun, what's that one that I never do because it's not public domain, Key to the Highway, Ain't Nobody's Business. I mean, tons of these 8-bar tunes, right? And they're nice and compact, but they're over in like, you know, 9 seconds, right? So the question is like, how do you elongate those and turn them into a tune? Or, you know, doing instrumental versions of 12-bar blues, you know, CC Rider is a nice one, which I've been working on lately. You know, so how do you take that melody and then, you know, draw it out into something? And no matter what the blues tune, you can apply this 7-step arc to it. I've been just realizing I could have closed this up a long time ago. Let's go back to me. That is the idea. And really just for all of these things, you know, you can really break down fingerstyle blues playing into these 3 big categories of groove, meaning, you know, your right hand and how the thumb and the fingers coordinate. Like you can do that, and then improvisation and just starting to get a handle on that, and then arranging, putting the whole big picture together. Those are the 3 things that will really help. And so if you feel like, you know, when you sit down to play or to practice, you're just kind of spinning your wheels, my hope is that by taking these 3 areas and giving you one specific method to walk through for each one, the horizontal 3-step, the 5 resolutions on the blues, and now this 7-step arc, that whenever you sit down to play, you have something specific to do. You know what to work on, and you know how to work on it. And, you know, what I want, you know, you could take these lessons and go work on them. And my hope is that, you know, instead of feeling, you know, sort of lost in the mess of trying to figure out how to put your playing together, that these 3 pieces of the puzzle can help you play fingerstyle blues with more confidence and more creativity, which I really think is, you know, the end goal for everybody, is to be able to sit down and play your guitar and have it feel good, right? So if you haven't downloaded the tab for these lessons, again, go to the link below, download the tab. There's a complete booklet with everything that I've been putting on screen here, plus the previous lessons on groove and improvisation. You can go watch the groove and the improvisation lessons as well. Those will be up for a little bit longer, so you can watch the whole series and review everything. And Todd mentioned the membership. On Thursday, I will sort of go over one more piece of the puzzle. I do run a monthly membership called the Fingerstyle 5 that is all about these 3 elements. And so I'll spend a little time explaining how that works and what we do in there, what it would look like if you were working on it, what you could expect, how much, you know, time it would take, and that sort of thing. But for now, I'll just leave you with the thought that, you know, you could definitely go and take these 3 lessons, and there is a lot here to work on, even if you just wanted to sit and work on this one tune. But I try to design these so you could take them and go work on whatever tune you want to work on. And this would give you, weeks, months of stuff to do. The idea behind the membership is like, okay, we've learned the horizontal 3-step for groove. We've learned the 5 resolutions for improvisation. Now we've learned the 7-step arc. How do you get that all into your hands and into your head and coming out on your guitar? And you can think of the membership as kind of like the big structure, right? Because every month I present another tune with these elements to take a new tune and go through the groove and the improvisation and the arranging. But instead of doing it in a week or 6 days, we do it over the course of a month. And you're not just sort of on the receiving end of the information. I do most of it by live stream, so there's room for questions and answers as I'm presenting the material. And there's also a pretty thriving community forum with hundreds of other people that are working on the same material that month. So when you have questions about it, or you're like, hey, who's been working on this? And are you having trouble with that, that voicing that is hard to play? Or, what are you guys doing about when you get to this moment or whatever? There's a place you can go and talk to other people about it, or for me to, chime in and answer questions. And even though it's a new song every month, all of those songs that get done in a month, everything that gets done in a month gets archived, and you can keep accessing it for as long as you're a member. So, if you get busy, like, you're like slammed at work, or you just don't have time, or you're like rehearsing for a gig with your friends or whatever's going on, and you can't work on a song that month, it's not like you're behind, because each month is self-contained, just like these 3 lessons were. And the next month there's a new song, and so you can go, well, I missed that one, but I'll start on the new one. I'll, get back on it. And then that other song is waiting for you archived if you ever want to go back to it. And finally, lots of people, like Todd was just saying, like, this works on a number of levels. Like, I've specifically, one of the reasons that, I always provide like a fundamental version of the tune and an embellished version of the tune is so you can engage with the material on whatever level is good for you. So some people are all about the tune. Like, I just want a new tune every month, and that's all they care about. And so they learn the new fundamental, and maybe they learn the embellished eventually. And then the next month they start on the next one. They don't worry about the improvising. They don't worry about the arranging. That's just, they're into learning the tunes. And then some people are really into just diving in, and like, every month they'll like go through as much of it as they can. They'll go back to look at old lessons and go, oh, this song's in E minor. There's another song from, 6 months ago, Motherless Child, that was in E minor. I'm going to go learn all those licks, and I'll put those in my improvisation too. So the main point is that it's a cumulative process, right? It's like, even if you don't super duper understand everything that we just talked about in these 3 lessons, if you do it again in a month and you see another lesson on the horizontal 3-step, another lesson on the 5 resolutions, over time that stuff starts to sink in, and you go, oh yeah, we're going to do that this time. We're going to do that this time. So there's this element of repetition, like you get to see these ideas come around and around, and variation. You get to see them applied to a different song every month. So that's what we'll be talking about on Thursday. And in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed these lessons, and I hope you, gives you a lot to work on, gives you some structure to your practicing, and helps you to learn how to play the way you want to play and have more fun while you're working on it. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you on Thursday. And I'll play one more version of the tune on the way out, try to squeeze a few more of these elements in. Thanks for being here.